So finally getting around to actually doing a video for the Fox Body front bumper support that I made for it. Before I get into detail, the front crash bumper is a 5 to 15 mile per hour crash bumper. If you get into 30s, 60 mile per hour car crash, the whole front of the car is going to wreck. So the whole front of the car is a crash area. Doing the bumper like this decreases to maybe a 5 mile per hour, 10 mile per hour bumper. But I just want to get that out of the way because a lot of people think that the front bumper, the front crash bumper and the rear crash bumper is like some high speed bumper for crashes. It's really not. The whole front of the car is a crumple zone. The rear of the car is a crumple zone. So with that said, this is how I did it. This is the 1-inch square tubing from Lowe's. It's the real thin stuff. I think it's made by Steelman. It's cheap, maybe 20 bucks. I think I might have like 40 bucks invested in this. I ended up making my own because the only ones that you can get don't come with fog light supports that I could find at that time. So I decided to make my own. I mean, the one that you can buy is just a round tube, and I think it's over $100. So I'm gonna make it my own. This is how I made it. Basically, I started off with the steel bar that contours to the front of the bumper, and in order to get the bend, I ended up putting it on some 8x8 blocks at the very edges of the bar, heating up the center, the very center. I measured it out to find just the center, and then it was basically my body weight pushing down on it. Sometimes you'd have to bounce on it a little bit to get it to bend, but the heat was really just to get it to start to bend, and then from there you can kind of work your way through the middle and it'll actually bow down. So I worked on that until it actually matched the bumper curve, and from there I did these straight tubes which run into the frame rail. Your factory front bumper support bolts up to 2 bolts here on the front. I ended up cutting it flush with the radiator support. Then I took a piece of steel, flat plate steel. I cut a square just a little bit bigger than the actual square tubing. I tacked the plate up against the radiator support, welded that to my front beam, or welded this bar to the front beam. I did a tack weld on that, same thing on the other side, slid it into that square hole, put the bumper on, brought it back out to where it sat flush against the bumper, and then I tacked it in place. Took the bumper off and then built the rest of it around that. So starting with the outside, I did a post that came down, which is tacked onto that one. And then I have this top post. Well, the top post is there because I didn't like the gap that the fiberglass bumper had underneath the headlights. I wanted to have the bumper actually sit pretty flush underneath the headlights. So this was made to bring that up. That's why there's that on there. And then just kind of trimming it down. But once I had that tacked into place, then I moved into the fog lights. You can either do the fog lights so that they are flush against the front of the bumper or in a factory position. I wanted it to be factory, so it's another 1-inch square tube welded with the plate going across, and then a hole drilled for the fog light to bolt into. Then from there, these 2 bars, the one on the front is for the front of the bumper to support the front of the bumper on the bottom. And then the rear bar is for mounting the bottom flap of the bumper to the frame. You can either drill the holes and do factory screws in there. I ended up just doing zip ties, the large thick zip ties, just because I didn't feel like drilling the holes for the screws. It made it easy. Then you just cut the zip ties, you gotta take it off. So that's what the second bar is for. It was just a matter of, get it close, test fitting the bumper onto it, and then making sure that everything kind of lines up. Super simple setup on it. Then you can see how the fog lights are mounted. The steel plate is pretty thick, so it holds the fog lights. They don't vibrate when you're driving. And then you can kind of bend them to where they actually sit centered in the hole. You just got to drill your center hole kind of centered. But that's what it looks like. I don't have a whole lot invested into it. I think the hardest part was just kind of figuring out how to build it. But that's what it looks like. The factory bumper weighs in at 43 pounds, not counting the fog light. This bumper support weighs in at 14 pounds with the fog lights mounted on it. There's a good amount of weight savings on it. And you never even know that it was there. It's a lot of work to not be able to see it. It definitely took a couple of hours of, thinking and welding, but that's what it looks like. Cuts a lot of weight off the front of the car. Yeah, if I rear end somebody, then it's probably going to get crushed, but I don't expect the car to hold together at 60 miles per hour. I'm sure the whole front of it's going to get smashed. But for a little 5-10 mile per hour bumper, it'll be good enough. It'll probably just end up bending a little bit. So, that's how I did it. That's what it looks like. That's it.